Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So it's 4:30 in Hong Kong now. Welcome to this session. Before we really get started, let me just share some housekeeping rules with you. To make sure this training can be conducted smoothly, please make sure your microphone is muted, your video camera is disabled. If you want to ask questions, make use of the Q&A box. We'll try to address your questions at the end of this training. And also, recordings and slides will be shared with you after this session. So make sure you're at the right place. So this is the seminar for the publish and share your research suggestions from editors and librarians seminar series. The title of this seminar is Publish Your Research in Trustworthy Journals. Today, we are very honored to have editors from PLOS. And over to you, Elaine.
Thanks, Fanny. I'm just gonna share my screen. Okay.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. And first of all, I'd like to say a big thank you to the HKU Library for inviting us and for organizing today's session. My name is Elaine Tam, and I am Regional Director for Publishing Development Asia here at PLOS. And today I'm delighted to welcome you to our session on publishing your research in trustworthy journals. Before I hand over to our speakers, I wanted to take a few minutes of your time to give a very brief introduction to PLOS for those of you who may not be familiar with us. So PLOS was founded around 20 years ago by 3 prominent scientists in life science and medicine, and they had believed that scientific knowledge should be shared openly in order to enhance scientific productivity and collaboration. So our founding mission centers on breaking down barriers to publish, to read, and reuse trusted scholarly research with the overall aim of accelerating progress across science and medicine. In 2003, we launched our very first journal, PLOS Biology, to demonstrate that a journal offering immediate open access upon publication would be embraced and supported by its community. And this year, PLOS Biology celebrates its 20th anniversary with a reputation as a pioneering and leading journal in open science. We are a not-for-profit, fully open access publisher with around 200 employees worldwide. Our main headquarters is in San Francisco, but we also have offices in Cambridge, UK, in Berlin, as well as in Singapore. And last year, we published around 19,000 journal articles across all of our journals. Our journal portfolio currently comprises 14 journals, all fully open access from launch. At the top of this chart, you can see we have our flagship journals, PLOS Biology and PLOS Medicine, and these are our most highly selective journals. Next, we have our field-specific journals in subject areas such as genetics, computational biology, pathogens, sustainability and transformation, and so on. These journals are also quite selective in nature. Our third category of journals, most of which were launched within the last 2 years, these have been built around multidisciplinary subject communities addressing the sustainable development goals, such as climate, water, global public health, and mental health. These journals are strictly focused on the quality, the rigor, and the ethics of the research conducted, and not so much on the novelty of the work itself. And later during this talk, you'll be hearing directly from Dr. Jamie Mills, Executive Editor of PLOS Climate. And last, but certainly not least, we have PLOS ONE, which is our biggest and most well-known journal that covers all subject areas. PLOS ONE is also focused purely on the quality of the research rather than the novelty of the work. And we also have Dr. Emily CHENETTE, Editor-in-Chief of PLOS ONE, here with us today. Now, we know that researchers today have a lot of choices when it comes to where to publish your work, and there are literally thousands of journals to choose from. But how can you ensure that your work is published in a journal that is focused on validating good science and maintaining the integrity of the scientific record? Or in other words, how do you choose a journal that is trustworthy? Now, to help provide more information on that question, we have three fantastic speakers here to tell us more from their perspectives. So our first speaker is Dr. Cheung from the University of Hong Kong. Johnson received his BSW, his Master of Social Science, and MBC from the University of Hong Kong, his MA in Philosophy from the Chinese University of Hong Kong, and DSW from the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. He is a registered social worker and senior lecturer of the Department of Social Work and Social Administration at the University of Hong Kong. Johnson has extensive experience in journal reviewing and editing work. He was awarded top peer reviewer in social sciences by Publons of Clarivate Analytics in 2019 and had reviewed over 300 manuscripts for more than 50 journals indexed in the Web of Science core collection. He is currently serving on a number of editorial boards of journals published by various publishers, including PLOS, Oxford University Press, Elsevier, Sage, Taylor & Francis, and Wiley. And he has been the section editor for sociology on PLOS ONE since 2021. Johnson, I'm going to hand over to you to start your presentation.
Thank you, Elaine. So let me share my screen. All right. So good afternoon, colleagues. And I'm Johnson, and then I'm also your colleagues and maybe your teachers. I don't know. But anyway, I'm teaching here, and then I'm also working voluntarily at PLOS ONE as the section editor. And before I work as the section editor, I also work as reviewer of PLOS ONE before. So today, my sharing will be kind of a mixture of my experience as an author. Of course, I sometimes submit paper as an academic, but at the same time as a reviewer and to review papers, and then as an editor. So I will combine these different perspectives in sharing my views on the topic, trustworthiness of journal. Okay, so I don't have a very long presentation, and just 10 to 15 minutes. And my main discussion question with you today is that what I mentioned here. Does impact factor really matter? Okay, this is my question. And then I will tell you my answer is no. Okay, so this is my conclusion, that I feel like it doesn't really that matters. Okay, but of course I have my justification, and to a certain extent it's also important. Okay, it's important. We need to take care of it, but we can also consider some other clues for us to determine whether a journal is trustworthy, other than just looking at impact factor. So to answer this question, I would say for the university administrator, yes, it is important. It matters because it helped determine the academic ability of a candidate, which may be one of you, that when you are applying for an academic position. Okay, that is important for the senior management of whatever university of Hong Kong U or whatever other university. They will make reference to papers that you submit to those journal, which has how high the impact factor is in order to determine your academic ability. But to me, I think impact factor itself is something like looking at the numbers at the stock market. Well, I'm not sure whether you buy stock in the stock market. Okay, I hope you didn't. Okay, because recently it is not quite favorable if you do so in no matter which stock market you are engaging in. But anyway, as you know that in fact, impact factor will rise, of course, but will also drop. And in fact, there are not many information that we can get in order to predict the impact factor of a journal. Well, maybe we can predict numbers up and down in stock market if you are good enough, smart enough. But even though you are very smart, you might not have a lot of clues that help you to guess or to predict the rise and fall of a journal's impact factor. Not even an editor sometimes. So it is something that quite challenging for you to rely on if you put a lot of bets on just considering impact factor as a most important factor for you to choose the journal. And the upcoming question is that, so does impact factor reflect quality? Does it reflect how prestigious a journal is? Or at the end, does the impact factor really reflect the impact of a journal or the papers that the journal is publishing? One recent example is that in one journal that some of my colleagues or some other colleagues in my sector has been considering, and before it has a quite good impact factor, around 4 to 5 something. Okay, so supposing it's okay, right? So so a lot of colleagues submit paper to it, but all of a sudden it becomes 0, being removed from the impact factor list. And this case is really shocking to a lot of colleagues, and also quite alarming to senior management of our field. So I would say if we really just relying on impact factor to consider the quality, the prestige, or the impact of a journal or papers that journals publish, it is not really trustworthy. One of the short discussion papers published in Nature also discussed this matter. So if the title said, if when seeking promotion, defining success is everything, and then sometimes we might rely too heavily on impact factor. And one of the problem is that these kind of metrics are used just as a shortcut by the overload faculty, overload senior management when they evaluate the work of the candidates for tenure. So I would also like to share some other perspective. This is in this paper, actually this short discussion paper also mentioned something called a Hong Kong principle. And this kind of Hong Kong principle is actually a five principle that's a conclusion after a discussion in a conference. And these principles are presented in one of the paper published in PLOS Biology. So I won't go into details, but these are the 5 principles. If you're interested, you can look at this paper and then to see what are the discussion is. And one of the things that I would like to mention is that according to these 5 principles, one of the principles is for us to recognize all the contribution to research and scholarly activities, including publishing, but not just publishing. I think reviewing and also editing is also something that we really need to recognize. And one of the things that I really want to advocate today is that in order to know the trustworthiness of journal, the one easier thing you can do in the first place is to start reviewing papers. Please start accepting review invitation, and you will start having a lot of clues in order to determine the trustworthiness of a journal. I give you an example. I also have another master degree in philosophy, so I'm also other than social work, I also occasionally read papers in philosophy. One of the flagship journal in philosophy, which is called Mind, which is published by Oxford University Press, is a kind of a leading journal in philosophy. It has more than 100 of years of history already. Okay, and for this journal, I would like to make this journal as an example of what is, to me, what is quality, prestige, and impact. I'm not sure whether you have read this papers in this journal before, but what I'm sure is that today you know what is ChatGPT, you know what is AI, right? And then you must have heard about one thing called the tuning test. The tuning test is a suggestion by academic for us to concede to distinguish whether someone is really just an AI or a real person. So tuning test is something that has already been discussed since 1950, and it is one of the most highly discussed paper in AI, and now many people have discussed this paper again and again because of the rise of AI and ChatGPT. And this paper was published more than 50 years ago in Mind. And what I would like to say is that, according to my understanding, according to my knowledge, Mind does not have impact factor. This journal, and it is not indexed in index that have impact factor. But to me, this is a very prestige journal, and also they publish paper have really good impact, really high impact. And one of the mechanisms they use in reviewing paper is that they adopt a triple anonymous mechanism, which not even the editor, of course, the authors and then the reviewer, they don't know each other, but not even the editor knows who are submitting the paper. And this mechanism also ensure the trustworthiness of journals being published. So these are some of my personal sharing of how I look at markers of journals' quality other than impact factor. I will also look at impact factor, frankly speaking. But other than that, what are the things that we might also consider, and when we are thinking of submitting journals? And I'm not sure whether you will also look at these items. So I will share with you what I will consider. First of all, I will take a look at their acceptance rate. Okay, it doesn't. In the first place, it doesn't matter whether they have very high or very low acceptance rates. First of all, has it been shown on the journal's website? Do you have any information about the acceptance rates? Okay, so and then normally speaking, the lower the acceptance rates, it should be the more a higher quality of a journal is. Okay, but my point is that before that, has it been shown? Can you find information about the acceptance rates? If you can't, can you get this kind of information, right? So it is one important metrics that I think that you can also rely on. Another thing is about the speed of the journal. And some of the journals will highlight their rapid publication process, and which is something that you should be very cautious about. If they can assure that your paper will be reviewed in a very short period of time and then will be considered in a very short period of time, and you must be cautious, because to my experience, okay, nowadays, especially after COVID, it seems that it's really getting more and more difficult to solicit reviewers. So it doesn't make sense if a journal claims that they can accept paper or review paper in a very short period of time. And another thing is that I would also consider what is the competitors of this journal, and how can we understand this? Okay, so if I submit to a journal, I might also look at the background of the editorial board members, and also the background of the authors that who recently published paper in this journal. And when I look at those people's background, I will also take a look at, other than this journal, what are the other journals that particular authors or editorial members will submit to. Then let me understand what are the levels of journals that authors are considering when I comparing with this journal. And then what I would also like to understand is that who are reviewing for this journal. So in order to get this information, one way you can do is to take a look at the list of editorial board, and sometimes they will have a list of potential reviewers on the reviewer board list. On the other hand, sometimes the journal will publish thank you note to appreciate the contribution of reviewers every year. And these are important information that you can take a look and to see, in fact, if you submit paper to this journal, who will review that? And then I will also look at editorials and who wrote those editorials. Are they wrote by guest editors or by the in-house editors? Or do they really have editorial? For some journals, they don't have editorials. They don't have a very clear editorial focus. And then they don't have a very clear management, teamwork of the journal. And these are also sometimes the markers of a journal's quality. And the last three things is that I will take a look at their backlog. And because nowadays many journals will publish papers which has not been put in issue, and then like in advanced article or online first article. And I will look how many backlog that they are currently have. Or I will also take a look at what is the last paper that they have published on the online first, and to determine whether the journal is active or not. For some journals, they are not very active, but you didn't know. But if you see the backlog or see the online article list, you may have some hints about that. And then I will also look at the most viewed paper of the journal. And for me, I will consider whether those papers are really interesting. Do I really want to read those papers? Are they really papers that have impact to me, at least as a reader? Lastly, I will take a look as whether the journal has incentives for authors, whether they really have the heart to promote scholarship, to enhance scholarship, not just as a business to earn money, right? So for some journals, they have price for good papers. For some journals, they have editor's choice of good paper. So these are some of the factors that I will consider as a marker of journal's quality. At last, I would like to introduce a website to you, which I have a link here. You can click, which is called a Think, Check, Submit website. And if you have encountered journals that you are not familiar with, you can use this website to. They have a checklist, and for each item, there are a few questions that you can consider. And if the journals that you choose can fulfill most of these items, they are more likely a reputable journal, trustworthy journal. Otherwise, they might be a predatory journal that they just want more paper and money, but they do not really treasure the scholarship or academic quality. So thank you, and that's the end of my sharing. Thank you, Elaine.
Thank you so much, Johnson. That was a lot of very helpful insights from your years of experience. So our next speaker is going to be Dr. Emily CHENETTE. Emily studied biochemistry at Columbia University as an undergraduate, and then went on to earn her PhD in genetics and molecular biology from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. She then completed her postdoctoral research at Duke University, where she analyzed gene expression signatures in lung cancer. She has held editorial positions at Nature Cell Biology and the Phelps Journal before joining PLOS ONE in 2018. Emily became editor-in-chief of PLOS ONE in 2021 and is committed to helping researchers around the world share knowledge and publish high-quality research that is accessible to all. Over to you, Emily.
Great. Thank you, Elaine, and thank you so much to the HKU Library for inviting us to be part of this webinar this afternoon. It is an absolute delight to be here, and I'm quite honored to follow Johnson's talk about how you as academics can understand how to pick a trustworthy journal for publishing your research. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the process that we follow as journal editors to support the publication and dissemination of trustworthy and reproducible research. So I think it will come as no surprise to anyone in this meeting, there has been a longstanding concern over fraud in scientific research. And I've pulled out a couple of examples here that go back to 2005, and obviously the concerns stem from before then, that demonstrate that there is, a reproducibility crisis across disciplines and across regions in scientific research. And we've heard a lot more recently about paper mills. That's been an active area where there's a lot of effort to try to combat, intents to publish research that just is fraudulent. But there's been a lot more of an investment recently in developing tools and understanding hallmarks of research that can't be trusted. So what then are markers of quality and reproducibility in the papers that are published? I'm going to share with you today what we as editors consider to be markers of quality and reproducibility. So what are we talking about when we talk about quality? At PLOS, we think there are three main indicators of quality, and we would consider that integrity and rigor and open research are the three indicators that can clearly define well-conducted, high-quality research. By integrity, I mean that the research conforms to norms and standards that are in the discipline. These are usually codified or set out as journal policies, and they exist in a wide variety of areas. So conflict of interest statements, for example, proper credit and attribution for everyone involved in the review process and for all the authors, and then also robust research ethics policies to ensure that the research was conducted to appropriate ethical standards. And here's an example. So as journals have adopted and enforced policies around disclosing these relevant relationships between authors and academic editors, for example, we have actually seen the level of disclosure increase. So during review, editors and reviewers then have the information they need to make sure that the results are interpreted appropriately and that any conflict of interest does not interfere with the objective presentation of the data. And so this is an example here of how journal policies can actually drive more transparency and more openness around potential conflicts that might arise between authors and funders, authors and academic editors. Journals also have policies around authorship and around credit. These policies here have a role in ensuring the integrity of author contributions. They mandate author contribution statements, and they can check for plagiarism, and they also can track contributions for specific authors over time. Finally, journals can safeguard integrity via policies on research ethics. And I've called out two here. One of these is from PLOS and one is from Science. So at PLOS last year, we rolled out an update to our human subjects research policy. And we now mandate that any sort of research that involves human participants, that the authors provide the signed, stamped, dated ethics approval document when their protocol was approved by a research ethics committee or an institutional review board. As a result, we've seen an increase in desk rejects, where research was not conducted according to the highest ethical standards. And we feel very confident that we are now focused more on, or that the research that we publish meets these standards, these internationally accepted standards of research integrity. The second example here from science is around their policy around large language models, or AI. Science has taken this stand that ChatGPT and other large language models cannot qualify for authorship, and will not consider manuscripts that LLMs have been involved in the preparation of. At PLOS, we have a slightly different standard where, if LLMs have been involved in the writing of the manuscript or the preparation of the text, we just require that it's disclosed. And obviously, authors have the ultimate responsibility for making sure that any information that is generated as a result of LLMs is correct. So this just kind of shows two different publishers, two different approaches, but it is all around ensuring that people who are reading the paper have the information that they need to be able to judge the integrity. Another important quality indicator is rigor. Rigor can be a bit more discipline specific. Standards will vary between fields to an extent. And this is a really wonderful opportunity for journals to work with their communities to develop and then to deploy solutions that support really robust peer review of things like experimental design, the statistics, the reagents, how they're described, how they're validated, and other things that vary by discipline. And I want to give a brief example here about animal research. So we as a community have a lot of work to do still to agree on these community standards and to ensure that the standards are used and communicated in published articles. So our journal peer review and editorial processes have a really big role in validating and enforcing these standards. But compliance can be mixed. So here's an example from a research from a PLOS biology paper. This research shows that the description of a randomization process in animal research increased between 1992 and 2011. However, the description of the sample size calculation, which is a fundamental step to ensure that the study is adequately powered to test the hypothesis, did not. So these are two reporting standards that we feel are very important. And you can see that randomization has increased, sample size calculation has not. So this is an opportunity for our community to come together and say, all of these things need to be reported in the manuscript. And as authors, making sure that this is disclosed in the methodology when authors go to submit their work. But it is also really encouraging to see the community come together to support reporting frameworks such as this MDAR reporting framework. It's a really important step to improving the rigor and to enabling editors and reviewers and readers all to assess different aspects of the study. It's also really useful as authors when it comes to study design and to preparing manuscripts. But I think primarily reporting frameworks are especially important for journal editors and reviewers when it comes to assessing how well designed and how well reported a study is. So the last pillar here is open research. First, it's important to note that open research is more than just open access. Open research is an entirely transparent and open way of conducting research, from depositing protocols to sharing data sets and publishing the peer review reports, for example. In this way, open research then gives access to intermediary outputs that may not usually be visible, and it allows the review and reuse of all aspects of the research lifecycle. So let's look at how open research plays out in practice. There are two fairly recent studies that have been published in PLOS ONE, and they both have linked the sharing of data with increased citations. We also have an analysis that was done in-house on our open research indicator data set that has shown a trend towards increased data sharing. This effect is more notable in publishers such as PLOS that mandate data deposition, but it's also visible in competitor journals too. So it seems like the word is starting to get out that sharing data can actually confer a citation advantage, which is wonderful. Code sharing also follows a similar trajectory at slightly lower rates. You can see here in this graph in the lower right that the effects of code sharing in PLOS computational biology. The percent of manuscripts with code shared increased sharply after computational biology mandated code sharing in early 2021. And the results from the qualitative survey of computational biology authors emphasize that the code really is useful to the community. Finally, I want to talk about preprints. So there's some evidence linking preprints with higher citations and higher attention for the published articles. Over the past couple of years, we've also seen a trend towards increased preprinting, but it's to a degree specific on the research topic as well as the region that the authors come from. So in our view, it's really important to understand barriers to open science, whether or not it's technical or behavioral, to preprint posting in other open research practices in regions and in disciplines where the uptake is low. So to wrap up with this part, I have a couple more slides after this. I just want to make the point that when we talk about quality and reproducibility, we are really talking about integrity, rigor, and open research. These aspects enable reviewers, editors, and readers all to access and to assess quality compliance, experimental design, reagents, reporting, data, everything at all stages of the research lifecycle. And the transparent sharing of research outputs in a transparent manner supports trust in research. So then, what role do people like me have in driving quality and reproducibility during review? So the UK government recently released a comprehensive report on reproducibility and research integrity, and they drew a list of recommendations for publishers. Although it's a UK government report, I do feel that some of the key findings are relevant worldwide as well. And we're really delighted to see that PLOS complies with many of these recommendations already. Oops. But I'd also argue that we probably need to go further. We need to partner with our research communities to identify and resolve the barriers to open research. We need to develop robust policies like the human subjects research policy that we recently put into place. And importantly, we actually have to check for and enforce compliance. It's no good to have a policy that no one bothers to enforce because we know that people may not comply. Finally, I would love to see a seismic shift in how research is evaluated, where we as scientists focus on the research question, the experimental design, and the quality of the execution. We have a couple of existing tools for this, but I'd love to see much more innovation in this space, as well as a thoughtful recalibration of the reward system. So fundamentally, the way to support quality and reproducibility is via transparency. It's important for editors, for reviewers, for the readers, and for the communities. And I finally just want to end on this quote from Marco Munafo, who says, "Without transparency, claims only achieve credibility based on trust in the confidence or authority of the originator. Transparency is superior to trust." Thank you very much.
Thanks, Emily. For those of you who are interested in finding out more about some of the policies and guidelines that Emily has talked about, you can find them on the PLOS ONE website under the guidelines for authors. So our final speaker today is Dr. Jamie Mills. Jamie received a BA in Biological Sciences from the University of Oxford, where he developed a fascination with plant ecophysiology before undertaking a PhD in plant sciences at the University of Cambridge. Jamie's doctoral research focused on the physiological drivers of climatic niches in tropical plants, and he has performed fieldwork in the Caribbean, Central America, Mexico, and Australia, and has participated in a range of science education and outreach initiatives. Through interacting with researchers in a wide range of countries and contexts, Jamie developed a keen interest in open access and open science, which led him to join PLOS in 2017. Jamie has been the executive editor of PLOS Climate since 2021. Over to you, Jamie.
Thank you very much, Elaine, and it's a pleasure to be with you all here today. So my part in this presentation is going to be to talk you through how things work through the lens of a particular journal. So we've already heard from Johnson some of the considerations that you might want to take into account when you're going about selecting a journal in general terms, and from Emily about the role of journal editors and journal policies in enhancing the rigor and the trust in the processes behind the scene, so to speak. So I wanted to now start to think about the community that can be built around a journal and some of the ways in which a journal might create some added value in the experience of an author who's thinking of contributing a paper. So we will focus on PLOS Climate, which is the journal of which I'm the executive editor. And just by way of introduction to the journal, it's been around for a few years now. We launched in 2021 and started publishing papers in 2022. So we're still quite young. And we were part of a small cluster of journals launched by PLOS at the same time, focusing on environmental issues. And as was mentioned earlier, they do tie in quite closely with some of the Sustainable Development Goals, which is something that I'll touch on in more detail later. So PLOS Climate is led by an academic editor-in-chief, Professor Emma Archer, who's based at the University of Pretoria in South Africa. And I'm the sort of in-house editorial lead for the journal within PLOS. Obviously, being a PLOS journal, we're open access and we're non-profit as part of PLOS as an organization. And I think that in itself is something to emphasize as a thing that distinguishes us from many other journals in this particular space. Climate publishing has traditionally been dominated by pay-to-read journals published by some of the longer established publishing houses. And so I think by arriving on the scene, PLOS Climate is bringing something quite new to the table. And I think that's true not just in terms of the overall model of the journal, but in terms of some of the specific activities and approaches that we've been taking, which it's my aim to cover with you here today. So just to give you a sense of the scope of the journal, it is intentionally broad. So you can probably deduce from the fact that we're called PLOS Climate that we focus on climate processes, climate change, climate patterns, responding to climate change. But within that, there's a whole suite of different subject areas. We're highly multidisciplinary, and you can scan through the list of journal sections on the right-hand side of this slide just to get a sense of the breadth of those subject areas. But we're also specifically interested in the interdisciplinary spaces that fall between those subject areas as they might be traditionally recognized. So we're trying to make those connections across disciplinary boundaries and provide a home for research that otherwise might tend to fall through the cracks. And in terms of the types of articles that we publish, we're principally interested in primary research, so that's the bulk of what we publish, but that does include things like meta-research and systematic reviews, which are obviously incredibly important in developing an evidence base for informed decisions on policy making in particular. And we publish things like methods papers and software as well. Alongside that primary research, we also publish commissioned reviews and opinion articles, which offer us a really nice opportunity to develop a voice for the journal around questions of climate advocacy, climate action, and we try to involve a broad range of opinion from the community in that side of things too. And so alongside this broad scope of the journal, we have a very clear sense of mission and purpose, and this is true of the other environmental PLOS journals too. And I've highlighted in bold within this rather long mission statement on the slide here some of the key aspects that I just wanted to pull out. So in line with some of the themes that Emily was touching on in her presentation, we're very much interested in trying to do what we can as an editorial community to maximize the rigor of the research that we publish by applying our editorial policies, by requiring certain types of metadata alongside the research to ensure that once it's published, everything has been done to maximize the chances of it achieving trust in the wider community, which, as you can imagine and as you can appreciate, is something of particular importance in an area like climate, where there are issues around public trust and dissent. And so we see it as being really important within our mission to do what we can to maximize that sense of rigor and trust. So alongside that, Emily's already touched on open research and open science. That's obviously central to our mission too, and I will later on just highlight one example of some of the work we've been doing on open science. We're also very interested in bringing together different types of stakeholders and audiences around the journal, and so not just speaking to the academic community, who are, I suppose, forming the majority of our connections, but we're also interested in bringing in policymakers and other types of decision makers, governmental representatives, people working in industry, and the broader public as well, given that these are all stakeholders who are affected by climate change and need to play a part in our response to it. And finally, we're very keen to do what we can to provide a platform for voices, constituencies who are historically underrepresented in climate publishing and conversations around how we respond to climate change. And so that's kind of woven into many aspects of the way that the journal operates, from its financial model through to some of the specific editorial policies we have in place for assessing research that's been conducted in different contexts. So all of these elements come together in the overall mission of PLOS Climate. And I did want to dwell briefly on why this is especially important in an area like climate. Those of you who are familiar with climate publishing and the way that it has tended to work in the past might not be surprised by some of what I'm about to say, but for those who are less familiar with climate publishing, this might come as a bit of a shock, but I think this is probably true of many other areas of scientific publishing too. So there are a couple of analyses or data sets that I just wanted to highlight here. One is an analysis that was conducted by Carbon Brief, which is an excellent climate reporting agency. They did this analysis a couple of years ago now, and they looked at 100 of the most highly cited papers in climate research. And they found that less than 1% of the authors of those papers were based in Africa, and over 3/4 of the authors were affiliated with European or North American institutions. So you can see already that there's this really clear overrepresentation, effectively, of authors in the global north and specifically in Europe and North America. And as a consequence, there's less space, less voice given to researchers and scholars who are based in the global south, especially, and particularly in regions like Africa. And I also wanted to mention another thing that came onto the scene in 2021, which was the so-called hot list of top 1,000 climate scientists, which Reuters put together. And if you have a look through that list, which is still available online, over 85% of the climate scientists appearing on that list were men. And again, in terms of geography, it was dominated by European and North American researchers. So there's this sense that there is an entrenched bias, I would say, within the way that publishing has tended to operate, and the kind of knock-on visibility that has for scholars in climate in terms of creating those geographical imbalances. So that's something that we are doing our bit to try to address at PLOS Climate. So some of the ways that we're going about doing that and achieving the other elements of our mission are to work with a truly global board of editors, including our senior section editors and our academic editors, who are responsible for handling the papers through peer review. They are widely distributed around the world. And they feed into the development of our editorial strategy and our journal policies. Myself and our editor-in-chief meet with them on a very regular basis to discuss different aspects of how the journal is faring and the types of activities that we might want to implement to advance our mission collectively. We also work with a range of regional partner organizations in different parts of the world to try to understand what some of the specific challenges or opportunities might be around climate research and publishing in those regions. And as I mentioned when I was talking through the mission, we're really keen to try to make those connections between the academic community and decision makers in wider society. We have a range of types of activities ongoing in that space. And finally, we also try to leverage other platforms outside of the peer-reviewed articles that we publish to maximize the visibility of our community. So that includes things like blog posts and, of course, social media activity. And I thought I'd specifically mention some of the work that we're doing to try to support early career researchers, recognizing that they face their own set of unique challenges in establishing their reputations in their field and making connections within their communities. So we see them as a constituency that we can offer some additional support to. And just to give a couple of quick examples of work we've been doing on that front, We've been running training workshops on scientific writing and peer review geared specifically towards climate scientists. And I've listed on the slide here some of the institutions we've worked with recently on that front. We've also been developing collaborations with networks of early career researchers to help put together some collections of articles, highlighting the work that they're doing in terms of their scientific careers, but also reflecting some of their experiences and perspectives of what it's like to go about their day-to-day work as early career researchers. And I've already touched on the sense in which we're trying to make some of those connections across disciplinary boundaries. In climate, as elsewhere, there have been traditionally very deep breaks, if you like, between those disciplines. So that's really integral to what we're trying to do, is to make interdisciplinary connections, to specifically encourage submissions that do include those different perspectives. And really importantly, not necessarily as a requirement kind of written into our editorial policies, but certainly in terms of the voice and the message that we try to project. We're very encouraging around things like co-design and co-production of research, and the involvement of non-academic stakeholders and local communities in the way that research is designed and executed. And certainly also in terms of sharing the benefits of the final research outputs with relevant communities and stakeholders too. And I wanted to just give a couple of quick examples of the work that we're doing around the interface between research and policy, since, as I've mentioned, that's something that's of particular importance to us, and I think also resonates very strongly with the climate research community. We have been putting together some collections of articles from across the environmental journals at PLOS that really speak to evidence gaps in the climate and environmental policymaking space, and there's a link on the slide here to just one example. We've been commissioning articles that speak to policy needs and to those evidence gaps that I just alluded to, but also on the verge of launching a new article type, which has been specifically designed to provide an in-depth essay format for getting into some of the nuances around the connections between research and policy. And we're hoping to invite policymakers as authors, or at least co-authors of some of those articles, which I think will be really interesting. And we're also looking at bringing together content that will specifically speak to the climate COPs, which, as many of you will be aware, happen on an annual basis and provide a really useful opportunity for shining a really bright spotlight on where some of the evidence gaps might lie in terms of climate research. I mentioned briefly earlier open research and open science, and just thought I'd share one example of what we've been doing at a journal level to support open science. At the beginning of last year, we set up a partnership with Earth Archive, which is a preprint repository, to enable authors to have their manuscript transferred at the point of submission to PLOS Climate and the other environmental journals to Earth Archive. And so they just have to tick a box on the submission form, and the paper will then be sent over and posted as a preprint on Earth Archive almost immediately. And we've seen really strong uptake of this offering. It's actually over 25% of PLOS Climate authors who've been opting in to have their paper posted as a preprint. So that's really an encouraging trend, which we hope to continue to build on. And I just wanted to share a few quick comments on the SDGs, since that's something that PLOS had in mind when it launched this group of environmental journals. Last year, in fact, PLOS became a signatory of what's known as the SDG Publishers Compact. So this is a group of publishers who've come together to commit to furthering work on the SDGs, both internally in terms of the way that they work as publishers, but also the way that they work with the academic community to encourage research which addresses the SDGs, and to highlight that research and make it visible once it's been through peer review. And we actually recently published an editorial on PLOS Climate. If you visit our journal homepage, it's featured at the top of the page there, so you can click through and have a read of that. And as part of this, we had to think about how the different sections of the journal map onto the different SDGs. And we also looked at how the papers we've published to date map onto the SDGs as well. And you can see that it's not just a question of SDG 13. Those of you who are familiar with the SDGs will know that that's climate action. Within the broad scope of PLOS Climate, we're publishing work which speaks to many of the other SDGs as well. And what we'd like to do now is to think about how we can really highlight those connections in the way that we publish and share the research within PLOS Climate. So watch this space on that front. And yeah, I think that's all that I had to share with you today. But I look forward to getting into some questions, hopefully. So thanks very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your sharing. I can see that there are already some questions in the Q&A box. Maybe I start with the first one. From a participant, could you please advise young researchers who need to publish but can't wait 6 to 7 months for a paper to be accepted?
I'm happy to take a crack at this, but Jamie, I imagine you will also have something to add as well. There are a couple of things that I would advise. The first would be to consider posting a preprint of your research and getting feedback from the community, from your peers on the study before you submit. This is a way that feedback can help point out any shortcomings in the study before it goes to a journal for the review process. I would also ensure that your manuscript complies with the specific journal's policies and standards, even something as straightforward as scope, making sure that it's in scope for your target journal. And that can help save some time and reduce the chance that your manuscript will be sent back to you without review. Finally, I think we just need to acknowledge that it does take about a month for constructive peer review feedbacks to be sent. It takes about a week to find reviewers, usually around 2 weeks for the reports to be submitted, and another week beyond that for the editor to make a decision. And that's usually if things are going well. So it can also stretch for longer than that. But that said, if you haven't heard back from the journal, in 4 to 5 weeks or so, always it's a good idea to check on the status of the manuscript online. Most manuscript tracking systems will allow you to see where in the review process your manuscript is. And if it's still no progress is being made, it's perfectly fine to reach out to the journal office via the email address that's posted on the journal website and just inquire. Most journals have absolutely no problem at all sending brief status updates to authors, and we really do try to make sure that the process is streamlined and efficient. So those are some of my suggestions to make sure that the process runs smoothly for you.
Thank you, Emily, for your answer. Do other speakers want to add anything for this question? Yes,
I can have some supplement on top of Emily's suggestion. And one important thing is not to be a perfectionist. Don't wait until you get a perfect paper before you publish. And even you got the feedback from the reviewer. You don't need to wait until 1 month to submit your major revision or minor revision. You can submit your revision earlier. So those are times that you can control. And for some of the authors that I work with, sometimes they are just being too serious. What I would say to some of the comments, but sometimes maybe some of the comments doesn't make sense. So what you need is not to do your research again, but what you need is a stronger justification of why you did something in the first place, and then to give reasonable justification and explanation to the editors, so the editors will consider your concern, and it will save your time in order to do a lot of revision. And at the end of the day, maybe the reviewers are not happy with that. So this is my suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you, Johnson, for your sharing. Maybe we can move on to the next question. It's about review papers. So the participant asked, as a new graduate student, one of the papers you publish first should be review papers. Could you please share what a good review paper is from the point of a reviewer or from an editor?
I think I can have a go at that one, since PLOS Climate is a journal which does invite reviews for publication. So we have some fairly concise and I think easy to understand guidelines that we use when we think about review papers at PLOS Climate. And one of the really important things is that they need to be balanced and representative of the literature. So I guess particularly if you're starting out on a research project and you have a particular direction in mind, there might be a temptation to think about putting together a review paper that you know has in view the work that you're interested in doing in future and your particular perspective on the balance of evidence in your field. But it's important to kind of take a step back from that and to take a wider look at what other people have been doing in the space, and to ensure that when you are conducting that analysis of the literature that you're going to put into the review, that it is truly representative of the balance of opinion in the field. So I think that's one really important thing that editors and reviewers will be looking at after you submit. Otherwise, a key thing I think is not to aim to be completely exhaustive, and there is, you know, a bit of a balancing act to strike here between that sense of wanting to be representative of the literature on the one hand, but also ensuring that the review doesn't end up being, you know, 50,000 words long. They need to, you need to pick out the key, and I would guess the more recent publications in the field that you want to cover in your review, rather than, you know, trawling through the entire history of the field going back 100 years or more. Those, I think, are the two important things to bear in mind. Beyond that, as with any paper, being thoughtful about the way that you frame conclusions and ensuring that there's a kind of coherent flow to the manuscript, that there's a central thesis or argument that the reviewer is trying to propose. I think that type of review where the reader comes away feeling that they have learned something and that, you know, the author has provided them with a sense of direction is going to be an article that has more impact than a review which is simply providing a kind of drier run through of a list of publications. I hope those comments are helpful.
Thank you, Jamie. I think maybe we'll go on with the last question we have right now. It's very specific. Is it possible to publish data which is about 10 years old in the area of sustainable development? Could you mention which journal this can be published in?
I can come back on that one. So I think if you're working with a data set which is, you know, a few years old, that's not in itself necessarily a problem, provided that you can explain in the manuscript why it is that you're using that data, what its continued relevance might be, and just recognize it as a limitation. It may be that the editor and the reviewers want to ask further questions about why you've not been able to produce a more up-to-date data sets, or you know, what some of the other considerations might be around using that data, depending on the exact nature of it. But I think provided that you're transparent about the approach that you've taken and you know, the limitations there might have been about collecting additional data, that shouldn't necessarily be a barrier in itself to submitting the paper.
Thank you, Jimmy, for your comments on this question. And the question is, the participant is curious about your own writing experience as well. Have you all been through the time when doubting yourself after reading reviewers' comments?
Yes, every day. Of course, that's the journey of being an academic, I think. And I'm always curious, am I really that bad? You know, there are a lot of time that, you know, the reviewer give very critical comments on your paper, or even on you being a person sometimes. So yes, it is quite discouraging most of the time. But when you get used to it, you will starting to believe that is the process that ensure the trustworthiness of journal of the scholarship. So and also a good reminder for us as being a reviewer, sometimes not being too critical. That doesn't mean that you don't write something true, but I mean you can present it in a better way, to not to discourage people, even though you are going to reject the paper. So I think what sometimes is a waste of each other's time. If I reject a paper and then you didn't read what the reason that I reject, why I reject your paper. So it really is something that we even though you are not being accepted, the comments are always important to you. Other than that, if I teach, I also receive, negative comments from students as well. But those are also very good reminders for us, and as being a better researcher or academic in the future. Yeah.
Thank you, Chun-Sing, for your comments. Do we have other comments from other speakers right now? If not right now, let me move on.
I was just going to jump in and
yes.
just say, I hope
Thank you,
that,
Jamie. Please go on.
Sorry. Yeah, I was just going to say, I hope that, seeing some faces on the screen here today is a useful reminder that everybody involved in this system is a human at the end of the day. I think it's sometimes easy to forget that when you are having that experience of being an author, submitting a paper and just receiving the emails with the reviewer's comments, the editor's comment, it's sometimes difficult to remember that there are humans at the other end of the line. But that is the way that it works, that we're all people and we all have each other's best interest, hopefully, at heart. And that's the approach that I think we all need to take when we're engaging as an author, as an editor or reviewer, is remembering that we're all in it together, and taking a kind of constructive approach to the process is going to be what works for everyone.
Thank you. Okay, so there's another question from Ram from Sri Lanka. Ram's done with maintaining journal quality, but is also concerned about access to high quality journals, not to mention submitting a work with a high APC. So in this regard, he senses that there is a huge equality problem between geographies, and this has increased the number of predatory journals too. What are your thoughts?
I'm happy to jump in here, and I think I can just make a blanket statement that at PLOS, we never want an author's ability to pay to stand in the way of disseminating knowledge. And so we have a number of different publishing models that operate across our journals, including free access to publishing for journals that are in the Research for Life category. It's like a group of countries that have lower socioeconomic standings, and so that the APCs are waived for researchers who come from all of those countries. I share your concern around the rise of predatory journals. I feel like Johnson's talk spoke so eloquently to some of the tools that we can use as a community to assess the quality of the journal. So Think, Check, Submit is a really great resource for this. And then also his views on how transparent the journal is around its various processes as well. I hope that I answered your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Are there any more comments from other speakers? If not, then I'll go on to the next question, which is, could you submit an article if you don't have an institution affiliation? That means perhaps as an independent researcher.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer this too. Yes, we allow submissions from people who aren't affiliated to institutions. We ask that everyone is transparent about how their research was funded, where they're coming from, any conflicts of interest that they might have. But we do have and consider submissions from independent researchers.
Thank you, Emily, for the answer. I think there are no more questions for now. But maybe some of our participants are still typing. So when we are waiting, maybe I'll share a feedback form before we see some more questions, maybe. Let me just share my screen. So this feedback form is for you to share your comments about this series. And we are still open to more questions. So please feel free to ask if you have questions. Let me also share the link.
Marcella, I want to ask a little question.
Yeah, sure, please.
Yeah, I just, because I'm a graduate student, but haven't have any experience of publishing any journals. And I'm just wondering, how do journals or editors perceive the idea of newness? Because I'm a literature student, and sometimes, like doing the paper or doing some research, and we're always asked to find the original ideas. But the concept of original is sometimes very large, and especially under such circumstances, there are many perspectives and fields being investigated like further. So every time when we found that it is a thing that may be so-called newness, but in fact it has already been get into some research. So while we may be submitting the idea that might have already been investigated for many times, and how do you perceive this kind of the journals, or like is that the real newness that you are trying to find? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for your question. I'm not sure.
Jump in on that one. And this really does come down to the journal that you're interested in submitting to. So Emily and I both work on journals which don't select on the basis of novelty or newness or originality. So our journals will consider research which makes a more incremental advance or even replicates previous work, which is, we think, really important to kind of establishing the integrity of the scientific evidence base. Whereas there are other journals out there, including some PLOS journals, which do select based on the editor's perception of how novel the work is. So you should consider, when you're looking at which journal to publish in, whether the journal has a specific policy or requirement around novelty, and how the editors might interpret that in your work. So it is something that does differ, and there are options among the journals that are out there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And
I just want to add that, when we are talking about when I am marking a student's assignment, what a paper is the paper which is new and also good. But the reality is when usually the part that is new is not good, and the part you are good is not new. So this is the reality. It's not really easy for you to have a paper which is at the same time good and also new. It's not easy. So especially as a young researcher, as an early career researcher. So don't push yourself too hard. Okay, it's not something that really easy to achieve. So set a reasonable targeting outlet of your paper. So don't aim too high, and then take one step at a time. I think this is what I would like to remind.
thank you for the encouraging notes. And I'm not seeing any more questions right now. Maybe we wait for like 1 to 2 more minutes and see whether there are some more questions. If not, then we can like end the session. And for participants, please feel free to share your comments with us. They will be very useful when we are planning the next seminars. And I see quite a few of thank you notes from the chat too. So this session is very inspiring.
So while they are still thinking or typing, I just want to advocate again. Please try your best to accept review invitation, no matter you are a scholar or a writer or a young writer. Okay, as long as you are being invited, you are being recognized as the person that you can give comments on the paper. So if you do so, it is a good chance for you to take a look at others' paper, take a look and understand the standard of the different journals, and then you will also know how other papers comment on this journal. I always feel excited to see another reviewer have similar comment than I give, and then I will say, oh, I have the similar standard of my colleagues, even though I don't know who he or she is. So this is just my suggestion. And then it's also a way that you can have a more insider perspective in order to understand the trustworthiness of a journal.
Thank you. And we have a related question right now. How do you become a reviewer or get invited to be one? Maybe the participant is asking about how he or she can receive an invitation to become a reviewer.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's actually one that we field on a regular basis at the journal. For PLOS ONE, at least, the reviewers are invited by the academic editors, and so it really depends on having a network of people who are academic editors on your journal, who will invite you to review the paper. Some journals have the ability to opt in to show that you're interested in being a reviewer for the journal. But I think it's about building your network. So, if possible, traveling to conferences, attending webinars such as this, so that, you get out there, you represent your science, and have a greater chance of being selected by an academic editor to review a paper.
Thank you for your suggestion. And I think there are no more questions for now. But of course, if our participants have questions later, they can send you the questions. I think you have already shared the contact information with us. Or maybe they can ask the libraries, and then we can try to answer their questions or refer the questions to you.
That's fine, Fanny.
Thank you.